So since I'm done torturing myself with clearing 100 accounts on stream, it is now time to get back with my regularly scheduled character value analysis on the unit starter in the version Luna 1 banner, that of which is going to be Lauma and Nahida in the first half, with Flins and Yelan in the second half. Hello there, Flip here, and in this video we're going to be going over everyone in the starting Not Cry banners, and giving a rundown on their strengths and why you should pull them or not pull them, and then close out the video by talking about the vertical investment of said units. But before we do that, as always, if at any points during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk about various topics regarding Genshin meta and I'll try to keep you updated. Shout out to my lovely channel members. I'm going to have to now speak a little bit longer just because there's way too many of you. I love you all and really appreciate the support. And also, so right now Chaska and Mualani are currently on the banner, so if you'd like to cut down on the costs while going for them, then I would like to announce the sponsor for today's video, LD Shop. LD Shop is a very safe and reliable top-up site that allows you to get Primo Gems at a great deal starting from 15% off, while keeping your data safe. As for transactions, you only need to type in your UID and region, as you can see me doing here. Just needed to quickly refresh my welkin, and as you can see it's here. And make sure to use my link, as that way you'll receive an extra 15% off coupon, as well as a 5% off coupon which can save you up to $50. LD Shop goes through official channels as well, meaning that you won't lose any of the in-game benefits like first time top-up bonuses, so no need to worry. And additionally, because LD Shop is so great, users who spend over $80 will receive a VIP membership which rewards you with free welcome moons. So head over to ldshop.gg using my link in the description below. What are you waiting for? Thanks to LD Shop for sponsoring this video, now back to it. So I actually recorded the script before we knew that Flins was not in the first half, because leakers said otherwise, and my script kind of makes less sense if I put Flins anywhere else, so let's just start with Mr. Aura Farmer. He's an electro polearm DPS revolving around doing lunar charge damage, but he does it on field, so he's quite different from Anefa. Don't worry though, to recap how he works, Flins' skill makes him enter a special stance, where his skill is replaced by a different one, and he also gains an electro infusion on his normal attacks. They don't do any damage though, and when casting Flins' special skill, which is just AoE electro damage, it also gives him the ability to perform a unique special burst like Veressa, that does a nuke of lunar charge damage. Flins is able to do 2 skills and 2 special bursts within a 10-second window. Those 2 lunar charge nukes from his special burst are primarily his damage source, with his normal attacks just filling time for his cooldown until he can do it again. And yes, even though he has one of the most stunning burst animations in the game, dragged to the depths of hell by Veressa, seeing his burst animation is not a reward, it's a punishment, showing that you fucked up your rotation. Now to go over Flint's pros and cons, to kick things off, his team DPS with Anefa is comfortably in the mid to high 100k DPS range, which is what the other Natlan DPS sit at with their best teams, if not slightly ahead, but still theoretically behind the likes of someone like Veressa, making him about what you would expect from a modern carry. And with how much lunar reactions are going to be pushed in 6.0, as it's a regional mechanic, you are going to get enemies and buffs to lunar reactions, which is going to shoot Flins far ahead of most Natlan characters in practice, just because of the shilling. But the thing with Flins that kind of makes me disappointed somewhat is that you need Anefa for him, otherwise his team performance drops by like 20 to 30%. But at the same time, Flins is kind of just average now by modern standards. With Skirk teams with Escoffier and Farina, they are far ahead of other options. Same case with getting Sitlali and Malvika, but the same discretion wasn't really afforded to Flins. While I would argue he's more dependent on Anefa than Skirk is on Escoffier or Malvika is on a Sitlali. For starters, when looking at Flins teams, the best alternative to Anefa is of course just another electro sub DPS like Fischl or Auroron, or choosing a buffer like Sara, who's actually able to buff his direct lunar charge damage with her C6. But if you notice something, when you do that, Flins teams become sustainless, unless you want to rely on something like prototype Amber Sucrose for healing. Anefa is not only the best DPS option for Flins, but she also allowed him to not have to sacrifice another team slot to sustain, which, considering the fact that Flins is a melee DPS, it's very likely that his teams just won't feel that great with sustainless. And unlike the Natlan DPS that are super mobile, Flins again, besides a few of his attacks, doesn't really have the luxury, making it so that if you have to replace Sucrose with someone like Yelan to have defensive utility, or use a Hydra healer like Kokami, we're talking about a very severe damage drop-off. And it's not even just that as well, because Flins' damage is pretty much just the 2 hits, which are his direct lunar charged hits on his burst. His normal attacks are there to just fill up the time and apply electro for reaction lunar charge procs, and his special skill does negligible damage. And as we know with characters like Mualani and Malvika, characters with nukes have a problem of overkilling enemies, as you don't get rewarded for killing an enemy 5 times over. Flins' damage is distributed in that same way, with his burst making him prone to overkilling, which is why Anefa being a consistent off-field damage source for Flins is amazing, as she can fill in the sustained damage that he doesn't have in his base kit. Ineffa is casually shitting out 3 to 4 times the damage of Fischl in this team, who is the next best Electro sub DPS, so her sustained damages won't be enough to fully aid Flins, nor will running a buffer as it doesn't fix his damage distribution problem. So yes, Ineffa is very important for Flins, and why that is kind of cringe, at least currently, is that there are just too many good drivers for Ineffa. Cyno, unironically, Vressa and Chlorant are really good, and then there's Nuvolette. Yelan is also really good too. Chalska, Arlecchino for Overvape. There are so many good options that with the shilling from the buffs and enemy mechanics, just having Ineffa alone and building one of her good teams is most likely more than enough to clear content fine, and you can just skip Flins. Yes, the biggest upside to Flins is the fact that he's the best at utilizing Ineffa and creates a stronger team than the characters I listed prior, but in terms of actual pull value, if you already have investment into the characters I mentioned, then again, despite the fact that Flins is a really good DPS, he isn't a jump from like Ayaka to Skirt. He's a very moderate increase, and you'll most likely be fine without him. Like with Kanish and Mualani though, it's very likely that Columbine has a big buff to his teams and he gets other supports to fill in his slots. I'm just talking about the current moment, so if you want to bank on him getting stronger later, I wouldn't stop you, but that is just how he's shaping up to me now currently. He's a good DPS with Ineffa, but most likely if you have Ineffa, you can probably build a moderately strong team with her anyways. That isn't too big of a jump away from what Flins will be able to do. With that aside, let's talk about the 3.0 savior Lauma. Excuse me there, did you play Genshin in 3.0 and planned on building a house of characters, so you got bricks like Nilu, Alhaitham, or God forbid the King of Sin himself, Cyno? Well, excellent news for you today, because I'd like to inform you that if you want all your Dendro investments to pay off, all you have to do is pull for a character with the biggest womanly and manly parts Lauma, and I would gladly take both at the same time. So I actually haven't made a video on Lauma yet, and I don't really know if I ever am at this point, but to go over her kit, she's a Dendro catalyst that exists to end the Nahida bloodline. The Greater Lord is not the only one being wiped from the Irminsul after her release. I should first explain the lunar reaction that Lauma enables, which is Lunar Bloom, and unlike Lunar Charge, which converts all Electrocharge damage to LC damage, Lunar Bloom works quite differently actually. When you create a Dendro core with Lauma on the team, this will cause your characters to gain a unique effect called Verdant Dew that can stack up to 3 times. So Hyper Blooms, Burgeons, and regular Blooms will do the same damage they normally do. The only difference is that you gain a Verdant Dew when they are generated. With this Verdant Dew, it exists to pretty much be consumed by Nordcry characters for unique effects, in which in Lauma's case, she consumes Verdant Dew when using her hold skill, and her hold skill will then deal direct Lunar Bloom damage. Currently, there's no way to trigger Lunar Bloom damage outside of Lauma's direct damage, so it isn't like an actual reaction in case of Lunar Charge. It only exists as a direct damage source from Lauma's hold skill. I hope that makes sense. Lauma's hold skill will consume up to 3 Verdant Dew, which gives her Moonsong stacks that add essentially Shenhe quills to any type of bloom damage when you cast Lauma's burst, so she's a bloom damage buffer. On top of this, Lauma skill will also deal AoE Dendro damage hits every 2 seconds for up to 15 seconds, and when dealing damage with her skill, she shreds both Hydra and Dendro resistances by 25% when crowned. For her passives, the only one of note is that when she's the solo Nordcry character on your team, regular bloom cores will gain 15% crit rate and 100% crit damage, but if another Nordcry character is on your team, the prior effect I mentioned is removed, and replaced with Lauma gaining 40 CV on her direct Lunar Bloom damage. And direct Lunar Bloom damage does look at your crit stats. So as of right now, for a lot of teams, you'd rather play Lauma as the only Nordcry character, as her Lunar Bloom damage is rarely important enough to sacrifice losing the crit buffs on bloom cores. Lauma's best team currently are pretty much anywhere where you can fit in blooms. She's the best slot on Hyper Bloom teams replacing Nahida, and she's the best slot on Quick Bloom teams with Tagnari, Cyno, or Alhaitham again replacing Nahida. Lauma is essentially just Nahida's evolved form, and massively shoots back up Dendro teams into relevance. If you have any of the Sumeru units that can utilize bloom, especially with Neil as she actually makes her competent in single target, Lauma is close to a must pull for you, and I can't stress this enough. She's just a massive increase across the board to the Sumeru cast. Now before talking about the lesser lords, time for a shameless self-promotion, as I always post my calculations extremely early on Twitter, so if you want to see them early, then there you go. And also, if you're enjoying the video so far and you aren't subscribed or haven't liked, what are we doing? I know that you want to, so let's help each other out. And if you want to help me out even more, then it would be amazing if you also shared this video around. So let's get back to it so we can discuss Nahida now. To summarize Nahida's kit, she applies Dendro and a lot of Dendro at that, so long as you're triggering continuous reactions. She also does give an elemental mastery buff to the active character up to 250, but this is a lot of times not fully utilized, especially when your reaction triggers are mostly off-field, and Nahida has pretty meh damage by modern standards. Back in 3.x, Nahida was very good as she enabled the highest frequency of Dendro reactions, which was much stronger than anything else, but because Dendro reactions have lost out in power compared to talent damage dealers, it leaves Nahida in quite an estranged place as a character. And now with units like Emily being a super strong sub DPS for burning team archetypes, and Lauma who's just a better Nahida even if Nahida C2, Nahida has a very odd place in the meta to where I can't really recommend going for her. In Hyper Bloom teams you just replace her, in Nilu teams you also just replace her or run her alongside Lauma with a healer, and for Quick Bloom teams you again just replace her with Lauma, because Lauma does a lot more for both bloom bloom damage, having higher personal damage and res shredding. So I simply can just not recommend Nahida for meta reasons as it stands currently, and getting C2 Nahida does not change this. I don't think there's much else to say. Let's now close this video out by talking about Yelan, who is also very interesting. Yelan is very easy to break down. She just does all field Hydra damage in single target while applying Hydro like once per second. Yelan's main strength in my opinion is just her synergy with Farina, as you can build double Hydra teams which lowers both her and Farina's burst CDs, allowing you to spec into more damage on both of them. Double Hydra is also very flexible as it of course enables reverse vaping consistently, as well as being kind of a wheelchair for a lot of outdated characters, and alongside Escoffier. If you want to play Yelan as an off-field DPS, I can only really recommend it in double Hydra teams, as because of both Nefa and Ino and how flexible EC teams are, there are almost no situations where you can run a carry and running a Nefa with Ino isn't just better. This is the case for someone like Arlecchino and just the overvape archetype in general, and should be similar with Electro or Hydra drivers as well. And then for Dendra teams which are getting a resurgence once again, you just rather have Xingqiu or Ino. So at least as a solo Hydra sub DPS, I do feel like Yelan is losing her standing. Her main thing is just the fact that the double Hydra archetype is still very good for a lot of carries with that defined supports. But that might change as we get more niche characters like Escoffier or Nefa, where running the super strong characters in their niche is better than being a generalist. The last playstyle I want to cover for Yelan, which I still feel is underrated, is going to be Yelan as an on-field DPS, because people don't realize how competitive she actually is. Yelan is able to do a lot of damage from off-field, but she's limited by the lack of buffs she can gain, and with the fact that she needs to build energy and can't run a strong DPS set. But if you play Yelan on-field where she can run with Farina, who enables Marochase, and is also feeding her continuous Hydro particles, and allows her to get 2 skills every rotation very easily, now Yelan can run a strong DPS set, and on top of that Yelan has her ramping damage bonus passive, which she usually doesn't benefit from, but now that she's on-field she can utilize it too. And for all of these reasons, Yelan actually becomes a very good on-field damage dealer. We even got an event build recently that is perfect for her, and Yelan can be played in Nefa teams, Escoffier teams, or you can use her in hyper setups, all of which are quite nice, and you get good vertical investment like her weapon NC2. And this is on top of Yelan being a very good off-field DPS as well. So I really like Yelan carry. Obviously isn't the strongest thing in the world, but it does lean towards the higher tiers, and is another use case for her which has helped tremendously for a decent amount of Stygian and Abyss clears I did. To round out Yelan's pros and cons, I've pretty much already touched on them, but she's a good generalist sub DPS. It's just that she's getting replaced in a lot of situations to fit in more niche characters, and unless she can move towards being slotted into those niches, she'll get left behind. Thankfully she's still competitive in both Escoffier and Nefa teams, but with Ino right now already being an upgrade to her in a lot of situations for Nefa, and with Colombina on the rise, I'm not sure how well it will pan out in the long game, so it's quite hard to recommend her too. Now going from who I think is the most valuable to least valuable, at the top I'm going to be placing Lauma. She brings Dendra back into the limelight and just has the biggest breadth of good team options in the meta, whether that's on Lunar Bloom or Hyper Bloom teams. That's hard to not recommend her. Her personal damage, buffing, and AoE application are just way too good to pass up on. You can honestly argue for the next 3 characters, it doesn't really matter that much. If you have a Nefa, Flins looks to be a very good pickup for you, especially if you're already planning on getting Colombina, who'll most likely make him even stronger than he is currently. Then you have Yelan, who as I said before is a good carry and off-field DPS. It's just that it's very likely that she'll be replaced as we get further into Nordcry, but that's still better than Nahida, who's already being replaced, so I have her at the bottom. Now we can talk about vertical investment, in which here is Flins's. Flins's weapon is a great stat stick on him, as well as the fact that it refunds energy. Flins has to build around 125 to 135 energy depending on the team you're using him in, so Flins's weapon helping in dropping that is nice quality of life and a damage increase, as it helps in him building offensive stats. At the same time, however, if you can just overcome Flins's energy problems, then he has so many good weapons that it's actually hard to recommend getting his signature unless you literally have nothing. Then there is also Flins's C1, which is one of the biggest DPR increases in the game. It just comes at the cost of having to build around 10% more ER than you normally would, as it enables an extra special burst but doesn't refund you all the energy back, causing you to have to build more energy. But again, if you can do that, it's a very good con, and I'm more inclined to recommend it more, as for one, Flins's C2 is also really good, and Flins's C1 giving an extra special burst helps with his damage distributions. Moving on to Nahida, if you do have for her weapon is dog shit and not really worth it unless you really care about Nahida's damage, which in a lot of teams isn't that impressive, the buffing the weapon gives as well is very minor. I would rather you just go for Nahida's Constellations if you really want to use her and not get Lauma. Speaking of Lauma, I didn't really know how to evaluate her vertical investment. If you go down the C1 route, all the Constellation does is give healing, which is there to supplement bloom damage and allow you to potentially run sustainless teams, although it would be quite hard to even with her healing, especially on a Nilu Bloom team. And then both Lauma C2 and weapon have very similar damage increases, so I really don't think it matters at that point which one you decide to get. I'm more inclined to recommend her weapon just because it requires less pulls on average. And lastly, Yelan. Here's an infographic of her vertical investment. Yelan doesn't really have that many weapon options, so getting Aqua is really nice. Yelan C1 can help to reduce her energy requirement and enable shorter rotations via having the skill always on cooldown, even after you've used 2 in a rotation. And then Yelan C2 is also also a really big personal damage bump, whilst it also increases her Hydra application. Personally, I think what you should get depends on what your plans are with Yelan. If you are primarily using her off-field, then her clone should be the priority, but if you're using her on-field, especially if you missed the event bow, then I'm more inclined to recommend you get her weapon. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment who you're pulling for in Luna 1, as I'd love to hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, I love you all. There are way too many of you now, but as always, the support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.